Captain Sarah Chun pressed her face against the observation deck's reinforced glass, watching the swirling golden clouds of the unknown planet below. After 18 months of deep space exploration, her crew aboard the research vessel Prometheus had discovered something that defied every scientific principle they knew. The planet shouldn't exist. According to their instruments, it was composed entirely of precious metals and crystalline structures that seemed to bend light itself. "Captain, you need to see this," called Lieutenant Marcus Rodriguez from the scanning station. His voice carried an urgency that made Sarah's stomach tighten. In their years together exploring the Outer Rim, Marcus had maintained his calm even when they'd encountered hostile alien species and navigated through collapsing star systems. Sarah moved across the bridge, her magnetic boots clicking against the metal floor. The rest of her crew, 12 of the finest scientists and explorers Earth had to offer, gathered around the central holographic display. What she saw there made her breath catch in her throat. The planet's surface wasn't just golden, it was alive with movement. Massive structures rose from the surface like mountains, but they pulsed with an inner light that suggested technology far beyond anything humanity had achieved. Rivers of what appeared to be liquid starlight flowed between these structures, creating patterns that looked almost like circuit boards viewed from orbit. "How big are those structures?" Sarah asked, though she suspected she wouldn't like the answer. "The smallest one we can make out is roughly the size of Manhattan," replied Dr. Elena Vasquez, their xenogeologist. "Captain, these aren't natural formations. Someone built this place. Someone with technology that makes our most advanced cities look like sandcastles." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. Humanity had been exploring space for over 2 centuries, and while they'd encountered various alien species, none had displayed technology this advanced. Most civilizations they'd met were either primitive or roughly equivalent to human capabilities. This was something entirely different. "Any signs of current inhabitants?" Sarah asked, hoping the answer would be no. First contact protocols were one thing when dealing with species of similar technological advancement. This would be like Stone Age humans trying to negotiate with modern industrialized nations. "That's the strange part," Marcus said, adjusting the scanner frequencies. "We're detecting massive energy signatures from the structures, but no life signs that we can recognize. Either the place is abandoned, or whoever lives there doesn't register on our biological scanners." Dr. James Wright, their cultural anthropologist, stepped forward. Despite being the oldest member of their crew at 68, his eyes sparkled with the excitement of discovery. "Captain, we have to investigate. This could be the find of the millennium. Imagine what we could learn from a civilization this advanced." Sarah understood his excitement, but she also understood the risks. Her primary responsibility was to her crew's safety. Still, they were explorers. This was exactly the kind of discovery they'd spent years hoping to make. "All right," she decided, "we'll conduct a careful reconnaissance mission. Full environmental suits, limited team, and we maintain constant contact with the ship. At the first sign of danger, we abort immediately." The next several hours were spent in preparation. The away team would consist of Sarah, Marcus, Dr. Vasquez, and Dr. Wright. The rest of the crew would remain aboard the Prometheus, ready to execute emergency evacuation procedures if necessary. As they descended through the planet's atmosphere in their shuttle, the true scope of the Golden World became apparent. The rivers they'd observed from orbit were indeed flowing energy, creating a network that connected every structure on the planet's surface. The buildings, if they could be called that, were beyond massive. Some stretched into the upper atmosphere, their peaks lost in the golden clouds that perpetually shrouded the world. "Jesus," Marcus whispered as they passed between 2 towering spires. "These things make Earth's skyscrapers look like toys." The shuttle's navigation systems went haywire as they descended deeper into the planet's energy field. Sarah had to switch to manual control, relying on visual navigation to find a landing spot. They finally touched down on what appeared to be a landing platform, though it was larger than most Earth cities. Stepping out of the shuttle in their environmental suits, the team was struck by an immediate sensation of weight. Not physical weight, the planet's gravity was actually slightly less than Earth's, but a psychological pressure that seemed to press down on their minds. Is everyone else feeling that? Dr. Wright asked over the comm system. Like something's watching us, Elena confirmed. But the scanners still aren't picking up any life signs. They began walking toward the nearest structure, and with each step, the sensation intensified. The building before them was impossible to describe in earthly terms. Its walls seemed to be made of crystallized light, and its surface shifted and flowed like liquid while maintaining perfect structural integrity. As they approached what might have been an entrance, an archway that towered 30 meters high, the wall suddenly became transparent. Through it, they could see into the building's interior, and what they saw left them speechless. The inside was a vast chamber filled with what could only be described as thrones. Hundreds of them, arranged in perfect geometric patterns, each one carved from what appeared to be solid gold, but emanated its own inner light. The thrones were clearly designed for beings much larger than humans. Each one could have seated 3 people comfortably. Those aren't just decorative, Marcus observed, studying his scanner readings. Each throne is generating its own unique energy signature. There's some kind of technology we don't understand. As they stood there, trying to process what they were seeing, the transparent wall began to iris open, creating an entrance exactly the right size for them to walk through comfortably. The message was clear. They were expected. Sarah felt her heart rate spike. "Nobody move," she ordered. "Something knows we're here, and it's responding to us." But Dr. Wright was already stepping forward, his scientific curiosity overwhelming his caution. "Captain, this is incredible. Whatever built this place, it's adapting to our presence. It's trying to communicate." Before Sarah could stop him, Wright stepped through the entrance into the chamber of golden thrones. The moment his boots touched the floor inside, the entire building came alive with light. Energy patterns raced along the walls like neural networks, and a low harmonic sound filled the air. Not quite music, but somehow pleasing to human ears. "Right, get back here now," Sarah ordered, but as she spoke, she realized that the sensation of being watched had changed. It no longer felt threatening. Instead, it felt curious, like a child examining a new toy. Wright had stopped in front of the nearest throne, his scanner extended toward it. "Captain, you need to see this. These readings, this technology is beyond anything we've ever encountered, but the energy patterns, they're almost familiar, like an echo of something we should know." Against her better judgment, Sarah found herself following Wright into the chamber, with Marcus and Elena close behind. As each team member entered, the building's response intensified. More lights activated. The harmonic sound grew richer and more complex, and suddenly, images began appearing in the air around them. The images were clearly historical records, scenes of beings that might once have inhabited this place. They were tall and graceful, with features that seemed almost human, but refined to an impossible degree. Their skin appeared to have a golden luminescence, and they moved with a fluid grace that suggested they were perfectly adapted to their environment. But the most striking thing about the images was what the beings were doing. They were working alongside humans. Not modern humans, but humans nonetheless. Primitive humans, dressed in simple clothing, learning from these golden beings. Learning to build, to farm, to create art and music and literature. "My God," Elena whispered. "These are historical records. But if these are accurate, then these beings interacted with early human civilization," Dr. Wright finished. "This could explain so many of the mysteries in human history. The sudden leaps in technology, the similar creation myths across different cultures, the legends of gods walking among mortals." Sarah felt the implications crashing over her like a wave. If these records were accurate, then humanity's development hadn't been entirely natural. They'd had help, guidance from a civilization so advanced that early humans would have perceived them as gods. As they moved deeper into the chamber, the images continued to play out around them. They showed the golden beings teaching humans about astronomy, mathematics, agriculture, and metallurgy. They showed the construction of great monuments that looked suspiciously similar to some of Earth's most ancient and mysterious structures. But then the images changed. They showed the golden beings departing, rising into the sky in vessels of light, leaving behind only their knowledge and the promise that they would return one day. The primitive humans watched them go, reaching toward the sky with expressions of loss and longing. They left, Marcus said quietly. But why? As if in response to his question, new images appeared. These showed the galaxy from a broader perspective, revealing other worlds, other species that the golden beings had guided and taught. It became clear that they were not just humanity's teachers, but teachers to countless civilizations across the galaxy. The final images showed something that made Sarah's blood run cold. They depicted a great darkness spreading across the galaxy. Not a physical darkness, but a spiritual one. Civilizations turning away from the knowledge they'd been given, using their advanced capabilities for war and destruction instead of growth and exploration. The golden beings were shown gathering on this planet, abandoning their role as teachers and retreating to this hidden world to wait for the day when their former students would be ready to learn again, ready to use knowledge responsibly instead of as a weapon. "This is why we're here," Dr. Wright said, his voice filled with awe. "They've been waiting for us to find them, waiting for humanity to advance enough to reach them." But Sarah was thinking about the implications on a larger scale. If the golden beings had taught multiple civilizations, and if those civilizations had failed their test, then what did that mean for humanity? Were they being given a second chance? Or were they being evaluated for the same test that others had failed? The chamber around them pulsed with energy, and Sarah realized that their presence here was being recorded, analyzed, judged. Every action they took, every decision they made, was being weighed against some cosmic standard. As this realization hit her, the chamber filled with a new sound, a deep, resonant tone that seemed to come from the planet itself. The golden thrones began to glow brighter, and Sarah could swear she saw shapes forming in the light above each one. Shapes that looked almost like seated figures. "Captain," Marcus said urgently, "my scanner is going crazy. The energy readings are off the charts, and something's happening to the local space-time. I think." His words were cut off as the chamber was suddenly filled with a presence so vast and ancient that it made them all stagger. It wasn't threatening, but it was overwhelming, like standing in front of a tidal wave of pure consciousness. And then, as clearly as if someone had spoken directly into their minds, they heard a voice. Not words, but concepts that their brains translated into language they could understand. "Welcome, children of Earth. We have been waiting for you for a very long time." Sarah tried to respond, tried to form words, but found herself overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was happening. They weren't just making first contact with an alien species. They were meeting their own forgotten teachers, beings who had shaped human civilization from its very beginning. The voice continued, patient and kind but impossibly vast. "You have grown much since we last walked among you. You have learned to travel between the stars, to work together despite your differences, to seek knowledge for its own sake rather than just for power. This gives us hope." "You're testing us," Sarah managed to say, though she wasn't sure if she spoke the word aloud or just thought them. "All growth is a test," came the reply. "But tests can be failed or passed. Your species stands at a crossroads, just as others have before you. The knowledge we can share will elevate you beyond your current understanding, but it can also destroy you if used unwisely." The chamber pulsed again, and suddenly, Sarah could see beyond the planet's surface. She could perceive the galaxy itself, vast and full of life, but also scarred by the failures of civilizations that had come before. Worlds reduced to ash by wars fought with technology they weren't ready to handle. Species that had turned their gifts into weapons and destroyed themselves. "What happened to them?" she asked, though she dreaded the answer. "They failed the test. They took the gifts we offered and use them to feed their darkest impulses rather than their highest aspirations. Some civilizations lasted longer than others, but in the end, they all chose destruction over growth. Dr. Wright stepped forward, his voice trembling with emotion. But you're giving us the same chance. Why? Why risk it again? Because the alternative is to abandon hope entirely, the voice replied. And hope is the most precious thing in the universe. Every species that reaches the stars carries within it the potential for transcendence. We cannot abandon that potential, no matter how often it has been squandered. The golden thrones around them pulsed brighter, and Sarah realized that each one represented a different civilization that had been taught and tested. Some glowed with warm, steady light. These were the ones that had passed the test and transcended to something greater. But others flickered or remained dark, representing the civilizations that had failed. How many have succeeded? Elena asked quietly. Few, came the honest reply. But even one success justifies 1,000 failures. A single civilization that chooses wisdom over power can light the way for countless others. Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. Not just for her crew, but for all of humanity. Whatever happened here, whatever choices they made, would determine the future of their entire species. What's the test? She asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. The test has already begun, the voice replied. It began the moment you chose to explore rather than conquer, to seek understanding rather than dominance. It continues with every choice you make, every discovery you share, every conflict you resolve through wisdom rather than violence. The chamber filled with images again, but these are different. They showed possible futures for humanity, some bright, some dark, all dependent on choices yet to be made. In some, humanity spread across the galaxy as wise teachers themselves, helping younger civilizations just as they had been helped. In others, they became conquerors, using their advanced technology to dominate and destroy. The choice is not ours to make, Sarah said, understanding dawning on her. It's humanity's choice. All of humanity. Precisely. You four are not judges or representatives. You are messengers. You will return to your people and share what you have learned. How they choose to use that knowledge will determine their fate. The presence began to withdraw, but before it faded entirely, it left them with one final message. Remember, the greatest power is not the ability to destroy, but the wisdom to choose not to. When your species truly understands this, you will be ready for the gifts we can offer. The chamber grew quiet, the golden thrones dimming to their previous level. The four humans stood in the vast space, each processing what they had experienced in their own way. So what do we do now? Marcus asked quietly. Sarah looked around at her team, seeing the same mix of wonder, fear, and responsibility in their eyes that she felt in her own heart. They had come here as explorers and discovered they were inheritors of a legacy that stretched back to the dawn of human civilization. Now we go home, she said finally, and we figure out how to tell the rest of humanity that their final exam has already begun. The journey back to Earth took 3 months, but for Captain Sarah Chun and her crew, it felt like a lifetime. Every day brought new debates about what they had discovered and what it meant for humanity's future. The four of them had become guardians of the most important secret in human history, and the weight of that responsibility was crushing. Dr. James Wright had barely slept since leaving the Golden Planet. He spent his days poring over the data they'd collected, trying to find patterns that might help humanity understand what was expected of them. His notebooks were filled with sketches of the Golden Beings and their impossible architecture, but also with questions that seemed to have no answers. The problem is scale, he explained to Sarah during one of their daily briefings. How do you test an entire species? How do you evaluate the moral development of 8 billion individuals? Sarah had been wrestling with the same questions. Traditional first contact protocols seemed laughably inadequate when dealing with beings who had been observing humanity since its infancy. These weren't aliens in the traditional sense. They were humanity's forgotten teachers, and they had expectations. Maybe that's the wrong way to think about it, suggested Dr. Elena Vasquez from her position at the geology station. She'd been analyzing samples of the crystalline material they'd collected from the planet's surface. The results defied every known law of physics. Maybe it's not about testing every individual person. Maybe it's about testing humanity's collective choices. Lieutenant Marcus Rodriguez looked up from a navigation console where he'd been calculating their approach to Earth. What do you mean? Elena gestured to her analysis results on the main screen. Look at this material. It's not just advanced technology. It's technology that requires perfect harmony to function. Every molecule has to work in perfect synchronization with every other molecule. One discordant element would cause the entire structure to collapse. The implications of her discovery sent a chill through Sarah. You're suggesting that the Golden Being's technology only works when there's perfect cooperation? More than that, Elena replied. I think their entire civilization is built on the principle of unity. Not uniformity, unity. Each individual contributes their unique strengths while working toward common goals. It's the exact opposite of how human societies usually function. Dr. Wright stopped his sketching and looked up with sudden excitement. That would explain the historical records we saw, why they helped so many early civilizations develop agriculture and basic technologies. They were trying to teach cooperation, not just technical knowledge. Sarah felt pieces of a vast puzzle beginning to fit together in her mind. And every civilization that failed the test was one that used their gifts to gain advantages over other groups instead of working together. As they approached the outer boundaries of human space, the crew of the Prometheus had to make their first crucial decision. Standard protocol required them to report their discoveries immediately to Earth Command. But they all understood that once they did, the information would quickly spread through human governments, military organizations, and corporate interests. The very groups most likely to see the Golden Being's gifts as weapons or tools for domination. We could delay the report, Marcus suggested quietly. Take some time to think about how to present this information. Sarah shook her head. We can't hide something this big, but we can control how it's revealed. She turned to Wright. Doctor, how long would it take you to prepare a comprehensive analysis? Something that presents the discovery in proper context. Wright considered for a moment. If I work around the clock? Maybe 2 weeks. But I'd want Elena's technical analysis and Marcus's navigation data to support the conclusions. Do it, Sarah decided. We'll submit a preliminary report saying we found evidence of ancient alien civilization and request a full debriefing upon arrival. That gives us time to prepare without technically violating protocols. The next 2 weeks were the most intense of their lives. Wright worked to document not just what they discovered, but how it fit into the broader context of human development. Elena focused on analyzing the technological implications while being careful not to reveal specific details that could be weaponized. Marcus prepared detailed charts of their journey, but withheld the exact coordinates of the Golden Planet. As Earth grew larger in their view screen, Sarah made a decision that would have seemed unthinkable just months before. She opened a secure channel to Dr. Amara Singh, director of Earth's Xenological Institute, and one of the few people in authority she trusted completely. Amara, I need to talk to you privately before we submit our formal report, Sarah said once the connection was established. Dr. Singh's weathered face appeared on the screen, her expression curious but concerned. Sarah, your preliminary reports have been causing quite a stir. The scientific community is buzzing with speculation about what you found out there. That's what worries me, Sarah replied. Amara, what I'm about to tell you could change everything. But it could also destroy us if it's handled wrong. Over the next hour, Sarah carefully explained their discovery, emphasizing the historical context and the implied test that humanity was facing. She watched Dr. Singh's expression change from curiosity to amazement to deep concern. My God, Sarah dear, Singh whispered when the explanation was complete. You're talking about our creators. The beings who shaped human civilization from the very beginning. Not creators, Sarah corrected. Teachers. And they're still out there, waiting to see if we learned anything from their lessons. Dr. Singh was quiet for a long moment, clearly processing the implications. You realize what will happen when this information becomes public? Every government on Earth will want access to their technology. Every military will want to study their weapons. Every corporation will want to exploit their resources. Which is exactly why they left in the first place, Sarah replied. Every civilization they've taught has made the same mistakes. They turn gifts into weapons and cooperation into conquest. So what are you asking me to do? Sarah took a deep breath. Help me find a way to present this information that emphasizes the test we're facing rather than the potential rewards we might gain. We need to make humanity understand that this is about proving we're ready for advancement, not about gaining new ways to compete with each other. Dr. Singh nodded slowly. I'll arrange for a closed session with the Xenological Council. Just the senior members who can be trusted to understand the implications. We'll present your findings as a preliminary report requiring further analysis before public release. When the Prometheus docked at Luna Station 3 days later, Sarah and her crew were greeted by a carefully selected group of scientists and officials. The formal debriefing took place in a secure chamber deep within the station, with Dr. Singh moderating the discussion. Sarah presented their findings methodically, starting with the discovery of the planet and building toward the revelation of its true significance. She watched the faces around the table carefully, noting which individuals seemed focused on the potential benefits and which ones understood the greater implications. Admiral Chun Yoshida, head of Earth's Deep Space Fleet, was the first to speak when Sarah finished. Captain, are you certain these beings pose no immediate threat to Earth? They've had the capability to threaten Earth for thousands of years, Admiral, Sarah replied. If they wanted to harm us, they could have done so at any time. Dr. Marie Du Bois from the Advanced Physics Institute leaned forward. The technological applications alone could revolutionize everything. Energy production, space travel, communication systems. We could advance our civilization by centuries overnight. Only if we prove we're ready for that advancement, Dr. Wright interjected. Every other civilization that failed this test was destroyed by the very gifts they were given. The room fell silent as the weight of that statement sank in. Finally, Dr. Singh spoke up. What exactly are our next steps? Do we attempt to re-establish contact? Sarah had been dreading this question. I don't think we need to. They're observing us. They've probably been observing us since we left their planet. Every decision we make from this point forward is part of the test. Admiral Yoshida frowned. You're suggesting that our response to this discovery is itself being evaluated? I'm certain of it, Sarah replied. The question is, what kind of response demonstrates that humanity is ready for the next phase of its development? Over the following weeks, the debate continued in closed sessions. Some council members argued for immediate public disclosure, believing that transparency was the only way to prove humanity's worthiness. Others insisted that the information should be carefully controlled to prevent panic or misuse. Meanwhile, Dr. Wright worked with a select team of historians and anthropologists to analyze the historical implications of their discovery. What they found was both fascinating and troubling. Nearly every major advancement in human civilization could be traced back to periods when multiple cultures independently developed similar technologies or ideas. The timing was too convenient to be coincidental. They've been guiding us all along, Wright explained to Sarah during one of their private meetings. Not directly interfering, but providing subtle influences at crucial moments. The development of agriculture, the invention of writing, the discovery of mathematics. Humanity had helped with all of it. But we still had to do the work ourselves, Sarah pointed out. They didn't hand us ready-made solutions. They just pointed us in the right direction. Exactly. Which means they believe in our potential, even if they're concerned about our judgment. As word of the discovery began to leak beyond the inner circle of the Xenological Council, Sarah started noticing changes in how people discussed the future of space exploration. The focus was shifting from exploration and discovery to exploitation and military advantage. News networks began running speculative pieces about alien superweapons and technology that could ensure Earth's dominance in the galaxy. The shift made Sarah's heart sink. This was exactly the kind of thinking that had doomed other civilizations. Instead of seeing the golden being's gifts as an opportunity to grow and improve, humanity was already thinking about how to use them for competitive advantage. Dr. Singh called an emergency session of the council. "We have a problem," she announced. Despite our efforts to control the flow of information, details about the discovery are spreading. We're starting to see military organizations and corporate entities demanding access to the data. Admiral Yoshida looked grim. "My superiors are pressing for a full expedition to the planet. They want to establish a permanent research base and begin reverse engineering whatever technology we can find." "That would be a disaster," Dr. Wright said urgently. "Don't you understand? The moment we approach their gifts with the intention of turning them into weapons or tools for dominance, we fail the test." "Then, what do you suggest?" asked Dr. Du Bois. "That we ignore the greatest scientific discovery in human history." Sarah stood up slowly, an idea forming in her mind. "No, I think we do something that no other civilization has done. We publicly acknowledge what we've discovered, but we also publicly commit to using any knowledge we gain for the benefit of all humanity, not just individual nations or organizations." The room erupted in discussion. Some council members called the idea naive, while others seemed intrigued by its boldness. Admiral Yoshida shook his head. "Captain, you're talking about asking every government and military on Earth to voluntarily give up a potential strategic advantage. That's not how humans work." "Maybe it's time we learned how to work differently," Sarah replied. "Maybe that's exactly what the test is designed to determine." Dr. Singh raised her hand for silence. "What exactly are you proposing, Sarah?" Sarah took a deep breath. "I propose we make a public announcement of our discovery, but we do it in the form of a challenge to humanity. We present the historical evidence showing how other civilizations failed when they used their gifts for conflict and dominance. We explain that we're facing the same test, and we call on all of humanity to work together to pass it." "And if they don't?" Admiral Yoshida asked. "If governments and militaries ignore the warning and try to exploit the technology anyway, then we fail the test," Sarah said simply. "Just like every other civilization before us. But at least we'll have given humanity a chance to choose a different path." The debate continued for hours, but gradually, support began to build for Sarah's proposal. Even the most skeptical council members had to admit that the traditional approach, compartmentalizing the discovery and allowing different groups to compete for advantage, was exactly what had destroyed previous civilizations. Finally, Dr. Singh called for a vote. All in favor of Captain Chen's proposal for public disclosure with a call for global cooperation. One by one, hands were raised around the table. When the count was finished, the motion had passed by a narrow margin. "Very well," Dr. Singh said. "We'll draft a public statement explaining our discovery and its implications. But, Sarah, I want you to be the one to deliver it. You were there. You witnessed the test firsthand. If anyone can convince humanity to choose cooperation over competition, it's you." As the meeting broke up, Sarah felt a mixture of hope and terror. In less than a week, she would address the entire human species and challenge them to be better than every civilization that had come before them. The future of humanity would depend on how her words were received and, more importantly, how people chose to act on them. Standing at the observation window looking out at Earth, Sarah tried to imagine what the golden beings were thinking as they watched humanity's response to their test. Were they hopeful, disappointed, or had they simply seen this pattern play out too many times to feel much emotion about it anymore? "We won't let you down," she whispered to the stars, hoping somehow her words would reach the ancient teachers who had waited so long for their students to prove themselves worthy of graduation. But deep in her heart, she wondered if any species could truly overcome its deepest instincts when faced with the ultimate temptation of power beyond imagination. The global broadcast from Luna Station was scheduled for exactly 1 week after the Council's decision. During those 7 days, Sarah Chun barely slept. She worked with Dr. Singh and a team of communication specialists to craft a message that would somehow convince 8 billion humans to choose cooperation over competition, wisdom over power, and unity over division. The pressure was immense, not just from the magnitude of the task, but from the increasingly vocal opposition they faced. Military leaders from every major nation demanded access to the raw data from the Golden Planet. Corporate executives sent representatives offering enormous sums for exclusive access to any recovered technology. Even some members of the scientific community argued that the information should be shared only with those qualified to understand it. "They're proving our point," Dr. Wright observed during one of their preparation sessions. The moment humans learn about advanced technology, their first instinct is to ask how they can use it to gain advantage over other humans. Sarah stared at the draft of her speech, making another round of revisions. "We have to find a way to make them see the bigger picture. This isn't about what humanity can gain from the golden beings. It's about what humanity can become." Dr. Elena Vasquez looked up from her analysis of the crystalline samples. "Sarah, I've been thinking about what those beings told us. They said the test has already begun. Maybe it's not about convincing everyone at once. Maybe it's about inspiring enough people to choose the right path that they influence others. A cascade effect," Dr. Wright mused. "If enough individuals choose cooperation over competition, it becomes the cultural norm rather than the exception." Sarah nodded, feeling a spark of hope. "Like a threshold effect. We don't need to convert everyone immediately. We just need to tip the balance." The morning of the broadcast, Sarah stood in the communications bay of Luna Station, looking out at Earth through the massive viewing port. From this distance, the planet looked peaceful and unified. No borders were visible, no signs of the conflicts, and divisions that seemed to dominate human politics. It was a perspective the Golden Beings had probably shared for thousands of years. "Captain, we're ready to begin," announced the communications officer. Sarah took her position before the camera array. Around the solar system, every human settlement would receive this broadcast simultaneously. From the mining colonies on Mars to the research stations orbiting Jupiter, from the sprawling megacities of Earth to the smallest outposts on distant moons, 8 billion humans would hear what she had to say. "People of Earth and beyond," Sarah began, her voice steady despite the enormity of the moment. "I am Captain Sarah Chun of the exploration vessel Prometheus. 3 months ago, my crew and I made a discovery that will change everything we thought we knew about humanity's place in the universe." She paused, watching the timer that showed her words reaching every corner of human space. "We are not alone. We never have been. And the beings we have discovered are not strangers. They are our teachers." Sarah went on to describe their discovery of the Golden Planet, carefully explaining the historical evidence they had found. She showed images of the ancient recordings, the impossible architecture, and the golden thrones that had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. "The beings we encountered told us that humanity stands at a crossroads," she continued. "We have reached a level of technological and social development where we can either transcend our current limitations or destroy ourselves trying. They have seen this moment before, with dozens of other species throughout the galaxy. The hardest part came next, explaining the test that humanity was facing." Sarah chose her words carefully, emphasizing that the golden beings were not judges, but observers, waiting to see what choices humanity would make when faced with the ultimate opportunity. "They could share with us technology that would revolutionize every aspect of human civilization," she explained. "Energy systems that could power our worlds for millennia. Transportation methods that could take us to distant galaxies. Communication technologies that could unite every human consciousness into a greater whole. But they will only share these gifts if we prove we are ready for them." Sarah paused to let that sink in before continuing. "Every other civilization that has faced this test has failed, not because they lacked intelligence or capability, but because they could not overcome their instinct to use new power for competition rather than cooperation. They turned their gifts into weapons and used them to dominate others instead of elevating everyone. The response from Earth was immediate and predictable. Within hours of the broadcast, Sarah's communication channels were flooded with messages. Some were supportive, praising her courage in sharing the discovery. But many more were angry, demanding to know why she had revealed classified information that could compromise Earth's security. Admiral Yoshida requested an emergency meeting. "Captain, my superiors are furious. They're saying you've given away Earth's only advantage. Every nation on the planet now knows about this discovery, and they're all scrambling to mount their own expeditions to find the planet." "Good," Sarah replied, surprising him. "That's exactly what needed to happen. The test isn't about which human group gets to the golden beings first. It's about whether humanity as a whole can work together. You started a race, not promoted cooperation," Yoshida argued. But Dr. Singh disagreed. "Actually, Admiral, I think Sarah may have done something brilliant. Look at the response patterns we're seeing." She brought up a holographic display showing communication traffic from around the solar system. Yes, there are groups trying to organize competitive expeditions. But there are also unprecedented numbers of international communications. Scientists from different nations are reaching out to each other. Cultural leaders are calling for exactly the kind of cooperation Sarah described. Dr. Wright had been monitoring academic networks. The historical implications alone have sparked massive collaboration efforts. Universities from every continent are sharing research about ancient human developments. Anthropologists are working together to re-examine archaeological sites in light of what we've learned. Over the following weeks, humanity's response to the revelation evolved in ways none of them had anticipated. The initial period of competition and territorial posturing gradually gave way to something more promising. International space agencies began discussing joint missions. The United Nations convened special sessions on global cooperation in space exploration. Even some military leaders began advocating for shared rather than competitive approaches to the discovery. But not everyone was convinced. Corporate interests continued pushing for exclusive access to any recovered technology. Some political leaders argued that cooperation was naive and that their nations needed to secure advantages before their rivals did. The turning point came when Dr. Kenji Nakamura, a respected physicist from the Tokyo Institute, made his own announcement. "I have been working on theoretical models based on Captain Chin's descriptions of the Golden Beings technology," he explained in a broadcast that quickly went viral. "What I have discovered is that their advanced systems cannot function without perfect cooperation between all components. You cannot weaponize technology that requires harmony to operate." Nakamura's analysis was groundbreaking. He demonstrated mathematically that the crystalline structures Elena had analyzed would collapse if any element operated in competition with the others. The energy systems Wright had observed would fail if their components pursued individual rather than collective goals. "Don't you see?" Nakamura concluded in his broadcast. "They didn't design their technology to require cooperation as some kind of moral lesson. Cooperation is the technology. True advancement is impossible without it." The implications rippled through human society like a shockwave. Scientists began examining their own research through this new lens, discovering that many of their most intractable problems stemmed from competitive rather than collaborative approaches. Engineers realized that the most elegant solutions required different systems to work in perfect harmony. Even economists began developing new models based on cooperation rather than competition. Sarah watched these developments with growing hope, but also with growing concern. The test was still ongoing, and humanity's response was far from uniform. While many groups were embracing cooperation, others were doubling down on competitive approaches. The crisis came when 3 separate expeditions launched toward the Outer Rim, each claiming to be following the Prometheus's path to find the Golden Planet. The expeditions were sponsored by different national alliances, and their stated goals made Sarah's heart sink. They weren't going to learn from the golden beings. They were going to demand access to their technology. "We have to stop them," Dr. Wright said urgently. "If they approach the golden beings with demands instead of humility, they'll prove that humanity has failed the test." But Sarah shook her head. "We can't stop them. That would just be imposing our will through force, which is exactly what the golden beings are testing us against. This is part of the test, whether humanity can collectively choose the right path, even when some groups are choosing the wrong one." "So what do we do?" Elena asked. Sarah made a decision that she hoped wouldn't be seen as interference. "We do something no other expedition is planning to do. We go back to the Golden Planet, but not to demand anything. We go to apologize for those who are coming with the wrong intentions, and to show that some humans have learned from their teachings." The plan was risky in multiple ways. First, Sarah would be taking the Prometheus far beyond its authorized mission parameters. Second, they might arrive to find the golden beings had already judged humanity based on the approaching competitive expeditions. Third, they had no idea how the ancient teachers would respond to their return. But as they prepared for departure, Sarah received an unexpected message from Admiral Yoshida. "Captain, I've been thinking about everything you said, about cooperation being the real technology. I'd like to request permission to accompany your mission." "Admiral, my military training taught me to think in terms of threats and advantages," Yoshida explained. "But maybe it's time I learned to think differently. Maybe it's time all of us learned." Over the next few days, other requests came in. Dr. Nakamura asked to join the mission, bringing his theoretical models of cooperative technology. Representatives from various religious and philosophical groups requested passage, wanting to witness what they saw as a profound spiritual event. Even some artists and musicians asked to come, believing that human creativity might be part of what the golden beings were evaluating. Sarah found herself in the unusual position of selecting crew members based not on their technical qualifications, but on their commitment to the principles of cooperation and wisdom the golden beings represented. When the Prometheus departed Luna Station for the second time, it carried 37 passengers representing 23 different nations and a dozen different disciplines. The ship had been designed for a crew of 12, so the accommodations were crowded. But instead of complaining, the passengers used the tight quarters as an opportunity to practice the cooperation they hoped to demonstrate to the golden beings. Dr. Nakamura worked with the ship's engineers to optimize the life support systems using cooperative rather than competitive algorithms. The artists collaborated on projects that required multiple disciplines working in harmony. The religious representatives from different faiths found common ground in their shared reverence for wisdom and growth. "It's like a microcosm," Dr. Wright observed to Sarah as they watched a group of passengers from different continents work together to solve a complex navigation problem. "We're proving to ourselves that cooperation is possible. The question is whether we can scale it up to 8 billion people," Sarah replied. As they traveled through deep space, they received regular updates from Earth about the progress of the competitive expeditions. The news was not encouraging. The three rival groups had begun demanding territorial claims to different regions of space where they thought the Golden Planet might be located. They had also started recruiting military escorts, apparently expecting the need to defend their discoveries. Even worse, conflicts were erupting on Earth itself. Some nations were withdrawing from international cooperation agreements, claiming they needed to protect their interests in light of the alien technology discovery. Corporate entities were engaged in aggressive bidding wars for any scientists who might have insight into the golden beings' capabilities. "Humanity is splitting apart just when it needs to come together," Elena observed sadly. But Sarah noticed something else in the report from Earth. While governments and corporations were competing aggressively, smaller groups were cooperating more than ever before. Individual scientists were sharing research freely across national boundaries. Community organizations were working together on projects that demonstrated unity and cooperation. Artists, writers, and musicians were creating collaborative works that celebrated human potential rather than human division. It's not all of humanity that's failing the test, Sarah realized. It's the old systems of competition and control, but new systems of cooperation are emerging to replace them. As they approached the coordinates for the Golden Planet, Sarah felt the familiar sensation of being watched. The ancient teachers were aware of their return, and probably aware of the approaching competitive expeditions as well. Whatever happens next, Sarah told her diverse crew, we've already learned something important. Cooperation isn't just possible for humans. It's the key to everything we could become. The Golden Planet appeared ahead of them, still beautiful and impossible, still radiating its subtle challenge to every assumption about civilization and progress. But this time, the Prometheus approached not as explorers seeking discovery, but as students hoping to demonstrate that they had learned from their first lesson. As they entered the planet's atmosphere, Sarah wondered if they would find the golden beings waiting with disappointment or hope. The answer would determine not just the fate of her mission, but the future of humanity itself. The Prometheus descended through the golden clouds of the ancient world for the second time, but everything felt different. The ship carried not just a crew of explorers, but representatives of humanity's highest aspirations. As they broke through the lower atmosphere, the crystalline spires and flowing energy rivers of the planet's surface came into view, more magnificent than Sarah remembered. "Look at that," whispered Dr. Nakamura, pressed against one of the observation windows. "The energy patterns have changed since your first visit." Sarah moved to see what he meant. Where before the rivers of light had flowed in relatively simple patterns, they now formed incredibly complex geometric designs that pulsed with purpose. The buildings themselves seemed to be communicating with each other through beams of colored light that arced between their peaks. "They know we're coming," Dr. Wright observed, "and they know about the others." As if to confirm his words, 3 other ships became visible on their long-range scanners. The competitive expeditions had arrived almost simultaneously, their vessels bristling with scanning equipment and defensive systems. Sarah felt her heart sink as she realized what the golden beings were witnessing. "Captain Chun," came a sharp voice over the communication system. "This is Admiral Martinez of the Earth Alliance Expedition. You are hereby ordered to maintain distance from the alien planet until proper security protocols can be established." Before Sarah could respond, another voice cut in. "Earth Alliance vessel. This is Captain Volkov of the Eurasian Federation Fleet. We have prior claim to this discovery site. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." A third voice joined the argument. "Both of you are trespassing in space claimed by the Pacific Rim Coalition. Stand down, or we will consider you hostile." Sarah listened to the 3 expeditions threatening each other over communication channels, and she felt the weight of humanity's failure pressing down on her shoulders. This was exactly what the Golden Beings had warned about. This was why every other civilization had failed the test. "Captain," said Admiral Yoshida quietly, "should we try to intervene?" Sarah considered it, but shook her head. "No. If we use force to stop them, we become part of the problem. The Golden Beings are watching everything that happens here. This is all part of the test." She opened a general communication channel. "All vessels in this system. This is Captain Chun of the Prometheus. I urge you to remember why we came here. These beings have been waiting thousands of years to see if humanity has learned from their teachings. What we do here today will determine our species' future." "Chun, you naive fool." Admiral Martinez's voice crackled with anger. "While you're playing diplomat, we're securing humanity's survival. When every other nation has access to alien technology, we can't afford to be left behind. That's exactly the thinking that destroyed every other civilization." Dr. Wright broke in on the channel. "Can't you see? You're proving that humans learned nothing from thousands of years of guidance." But the 3 military expeditions weren't listening. As Sarah watched in horror, they began maneuvering for strategic positions around the planet, their weapons systems powering up as they prepared to enforce their competing claims. The Golden Planet's response was immediate and unmistakable. The energy rivers on the surface suddenly blazed brighter, and the spires began resonating with a deep harmonic tone that could be felt even through the ship's hulls. More importantly, the three military vessels found their systems beginning to malfunction. "What's happening?" Captain Volkov's voice carried a note of panic. "Our weapons systems are going offline." "Same here," reported Admiral Martinez. "It's like something is interfering with our electronics." Sarah realized what was happening. "They're not attacking you. They're demonstrating. Their technology only works through cooperation. The more aggressively you approach them, the more your own aggressive systems will fail." Dr. Nakamura was studying his instruments with excitement. "Captain, look at this. The interference patterns aren't random. They're selectively targeting systems designed for conflict while leaving life support and basic navigation intact." As if to prove his point, the Golden Planet's influence intensified. The military vessels found their missile systems, energy weapons, and defensive shields completely non-functional, while their communication, life support, and propulsion systems continued working normally. Whatever happens down there, remember that we represent humanity's potential, not its failures. We're here to learn, not to take. We're here to demonstrate that some humans understand the lessons they've been trying to teach us. The landing was smooth, and as the crew disembarked, they were struck by the same sensation of vast presence that Sarah remembered from her first visit. But this time, the feeling was more complex. Along with the sense of ancient wisdom and patient observation, there was something that felt almost like sadness. The nearest crystalline structure began to iris open, creating an entrance size for their group. As they walked through, Sarah noticed that the Chamber of Golden Thrones was different. Where before there had been hundreds of thrones, now there were thousands, arranged in increasingly complex geometric patterns that seemed to extend beyond the physical boundaries of the room itself. "My God," whispered Dr. Nakamura. "Each throne represents a different civilization. Look at the patterns." Sarah followed his gaze and realized he was right. The thrones were arranged in clusters, with some groups glowing brightly while others flickered or remained dark. The pattern told the story of countless species that had reached this moment of testing. As they moved deeper into the chamber, the voice of the golden beings filled their consciousness again, but it carried a weight of accumulated sorrow that hadn't been present before. "You have returned, children of Earth, and you have brought others with you. We came to apologize for them," Sarah said aloud, though she wasn't sure if she spoke or merely thought the words. "Not all humans have learned from your teachings." "We know," came the reply. "We have been watching your species since you departed from this place. We have seen the division, the competition, the failure to understand the lessons we tried to teach." The chamber filled with images again, but these showed recent events from Earth and human space. The competitive expeditions launching in secrecy. The breakdown of international cooperation. The arms race to exploit alien technology. The growing conflicts over territorial claims to space. "We have seen this pattern many times before," the voice continued. "A species reaches the threshold of advancement and immediately begins using their new knowledge to gain advantages over others of their own kind." Dr. Wright stepped forward. "But you've also seen the cooperation. The scientists sharing research across national boundaries. The communities working together on cooperative projects. The individuals choosing wisdom over power." "Yes," the voice acknowledged. "And that is why we have not yet closed the door entirely. Your species shows the same duality we have observed in others, the capacity for both transcendence and destruction, often within the same individuals." The images around them shifted to show the positive developments that had emerged since Sarah's first broadcast. International scientific collaborations, community organizations working across cultural boundaries, artists and musicians creating works that celebrated human unity rather than division. "Some of you have learned," the voice continued. "But the question remains, are there enough who have learned to influence the others?" Admiral Yoshida stepped forward, his military bearing somehow both formal and humble. I spent my life training to fight threats and secure advantages for my people. But I'm here because I finally understand that the real threat to humanity is our inability to work together. What can we do to prove that we can change? The Golden Being's response came not in words, but in a sudden shift in the chamber around them. The throne patterns rearranged themselves, and new images appeared showing possible futures for humanity. In some, the species overcame its competitive instincts and began working together on a global scale. In others, the divisions deepened until human civilization collapsed under the weight of its own conflicts. The test continues, the voice explained. But we offer you a choice that we have never offered before. We can share with you a portion of our knowledge, enough to demonstrate its potential, but not enough to be dangerous if misused. What your species does with this gift will determine whether you receive the rest. Sarah felt the magnitude of what was being offered. You're giving us a chance to prove ourselves on a smaller scale first. Precisely. Other civilizations demanded full access to our knowledge immediately. You are the first to acknowledge that you might not be ready for everything we could teach you. Dr. Nakamura practically vibrated with excitement. What kind of knowledge are you offering? The answer came in the form of direct understanding flooding into their minds. Sarah gasped as she suddenly comprehended principles of energy manipulation that could revolutionize power generation without any potential military applications. The knowledge was specifically designed to be useful only for cooperation. Trying to use it competitively would cause the systems to fail. Elena found herself understanding crystalline formations that could enhance communication across vast distances, but only if used to connect rather than dominate. Wright received insights into historical patterns that could help civilizations avoid the mistakes that had destroyed others. Each member of their group received knowledge tailored to their expertise, but all of it required cooperation to implement effectively. The Golden Beings had given them tools that could only build, never destroy. Take this knowledge back to your people, the voice instructed. Demonstrate its potential. Show them that advancement through cooperation is not only possible, but more effective than advancement through competition. If enough of your kind embrace this path, we will share more. As they prepared to leave the chamber, Sarah asked the question that had been weighing on her mind. What about the other expeditions? The ones that came here with weapons and demands. They have received their own lesson, the voice replied. Their systems will continue to malfunction as long as they approach us with hostile intent. They must choose to change their approach or return home with nothing. As the group from the Prometheus made their way back to their ship, they could see the 3 military vessels in orbit, their crews apparently struggling with continued system failures. The communication channels were filled with frustrated demands and confused reports. This is Admiral Martinez to all vessels. We're experiencing complete failure of all weapon systems. Recommend immediate withdrawal to reassess the situation. Agreed, came Captain Volkov's response. This technology is beyond our current understanding. We need to approach this differently. But even as 2 of the expeditions began preparing to withdraw, the third showed signs of escalating their aggressive approach. Captain Chundao of the Pacific Rim Coalition was demanding that his engineering teams find ways to override the interference. I don't care what it takes. His voice crackled over the open channels. We're not returning empty-handed. Increase power to all systems and prepare for forced landing. Sarah watched in horror as the Coalition vessel began a rapid descent toward the planet's surface, its crew apparently determined to take what they wanted by force. But as the ship entered the planet's atmosphere, the interference intensified dramatically. The Coalition vessel began tumbling out of control, its systems failing one by one. It became clear that the ship was going to crash, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. Without hesitation, Admiral Yoshida took control of the Prometheus's communication system. Coalition vessel, this is Admiral Yoshida. Cut your engines immediately and deploy emergency systems. We're coming to assist. Admiral, Sarah warned. If we try to help them, we might be seen as participating in their aggressive approach. But Yoshida shook his head. No, Captain. Helping people in need isn't aggression. It's what cooperation looks like. The Prometheus moved to intercept the falling coalition ship, using their tractor beam to slow its descent and guide it to a safe landing on the planet's surface. The action required perfect coordination between multiple systems and crew members, exactly the kind of cooperation the Golden Beings valued. As they helped evacuate the damaged coalition vessel, Captain Shindao approached Sarah with a mixture of shame and gratitude. Captain Shun, I owe you an apology. To all of you. I came here thinking I was protecting my people's interests, but I nearly got them killed because I couldn't let go of the need to compete. The voice of the Golden Beings filled the air around them one final time. This is what we have been waiting to see. Not perfection, but the willingness to help others even when they have acted against their own best interests. Not the absence of competition, but the choice to prioritize cooperation when it truly matters. As all 4 human expeditions prepared to return to Earth, they carried with them more than just new technology and knowledge. They carried proof that humanity could choose a different path. The 3 military expeditions had learned that aggressive approaches to the Golden Beings would always fail, while the cooperative mission had been rewarded with gifts that could benefit all humanity. But the real test was just beginning. They were returning to a civilization that was still deeply divided, still locked in patterns of competition and conflict that stretched back thousands of years. The question now was whether the lessons learned among the Golden Thrones could be applied to the complex realities of human society. As Earth grew larger in their view screens, Sarah Chun prepared for the greatest challenge of her life, convincing 8 billion humans to embrace the wisdom of their ancient teachers before it was too late. The return journey to Earth took on the atmosphere of a rolling conference as representatives from all 4 expeditions shared their experiences. Captain Chun Dao, whose aggressive approach had nearly ended in disaster, became one of the most vocal advocates for the cooperative approach the Golden Beings had demonstrated. I spent 20 years in military service believing that strength came from having better weapons than your enemies, he explained to the combined crews during one of their daily meetings. But their technology made our most advanced weapons useless simply by existing. They didn't fight us, they made fighting pointless. Dr. Nakamura was working around the clock to understand the knowledge the Golden Beings had shared. His preliminary analysis suggested that their gifts could revolutionize human civilization within a decade, but only if implemented cooperatively. Look at these energy patterns, he explained, projecting holographic models for everyone to see. The power generation systems they've shown us become more efficient the more they're connected to other systems. A single unit might power a small building, but a network of coordinated units could power entire continents. Admiral Martinez, who had led one of the competitive expeditions, studied the projections with growing amazement. You're saying the technology actually rewards cooperation? More than that, Dr. Wright interjected. It requires cooperation. The systems literally cannot function at optimal levels unless they're working in harmony with other systems. It's like they've encoded their entire philosophy into the technology itself. As they approached human space, they began receiving communications from Earth that painted a complex picture of how humanity was responding to the unfolding situation. The failure of the military expeditions to secure alien technology by force had sent shockwaves through political and military establishments worldwide. But the response wasn't uniformly negative. Dr. Singh reported that scientific communities across the globe were embracing collaborative approaches at unprecedented levels. Universities were forming international research consortiums. Corporate entities were experimenting with cooperative rather than competitive business models. Even some governments were beginning to discuss genuine international cooperation rather than mere diplomatic politeness. The most encouraging development, Dr. Singh explained during their long-range communication, is happening at the grassroots level. Communities everywhere are organizing cooperative projects inspired by your reports. They're not waiting for governments or corporations to lead. They're demonstrating cooperation themselves. Sarah felt a spark of hope as she listened to these reports. Maybe humanity was finally ready to learn from its ancient teachers. When the 4 ships entered Earth orbit, they were greeted by an unprecedented scene. Representatives from every nation, every major corporation, and every significant scientific institution were gathered at Luna Station for what was being called the Global Response Conference. The goal was to develop a unified human approach to the Golden Beings Challenge. But as Sarah prepared to address the assembly, she received troubling private communications. Several military leaders were demanding classified briefings about alien defensive capabilities. Corporate executives were pushing for exclusive licensing agreements for any recovered technology. Some political leaders were arguing that cooperation with other nations would compromise their sovereignty. The old patterns are still there, Admiral Yoshida observed grimly. People understand intellectually that cooperation is necessary, but they're still driven by competitive instincts. Sarah made a decision that would have shocked her younger self. Instead of addressing the formal assembly first, she requested permission to broadcast directly to Earth's general population. She wanted to speak to the billions of individual humans who would ultimately determine their species' response to the test. People of Earth, she began, standing before cameras that would carry her words to every corner of human civilization. I want to tell you what it feels like to stand in the presence of beings who are thousands of years older and infinitely wiser than we are. She spoke about the chamber of golden thrones, each one representing a civilization that had faced the same choice humanity now confronted. She described the sadness in the ancient beings' communication as they watched species after species choose competition over cooperation. They've been waiting for us, she explained, not as judges or conquerors, but as teachers hoping their students would finally understand the lessons they've been trying to teach us for millennia. And the most important lesson is this: true advancement is impossible without cooperation. Sarah went on to demonstrate some of the simpler technologies the Golden Beings had shared, showing how they required multiple operators working in perfect harmony. She explained that trying to use the technology competitively caused immediate system failures. This isn't about giving up competition entirely, she clarified. Competition can drive excellence and innovation. But there's a difference between competing to be your best and competing to dominate others. The Golden Beings have shown us that the greatest achievements require us to work together, not against each other. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours of her broadcast, communication networks worldwide were flooded with messages of support. Communities began organizing cooperative projects inspired by her demonstration. Scientists shared research freely across national boundaries. Artists collaborated on works that celebrated human potential for unity. But the institutional resistance was equally intense. Military leaders demanded that the alien technology be classified and controlled. Corporations insisted that proper patents and licensing agreements were necessary to prevent chaos. Some political leaders argued that uncontrolled cooperation would lead to the breakdown of national sovereignty. The conflict came to a head during the Global Response Conference when Admiral Harrison, the highest-ranking military officer on Earth, stood to address the assembly. Captain Chen's idealism is admirable, he declared, but we cannot ignore the reality of human nature. If we share this technology freely with all nations, it will inevitably be weaponized by hostile actors. We must maintain control to ensure global security. Sarah rose to respond, but she was interrupted by an unexpected voice. Dr. Elena Vasquez had been working with the crystalline samples in Luna Station's laboratory, and her analysis had just revealed something extraordinary. Admiral Harrison, Elena announced over the conference communication system, I need you to see something immediately. All of you need to see this. The central display activated, showing Elena's laboratory where she had been experimenting with the Golden Beings crystal technology. But something had changed. The crystals were no longer just samples. They had grown into a complex network that filled most of the lab space. The crystals have been responding to the discussions here, Elena explained. They've been forming new configurations based on the cooperation levels they detect in our communications. Watch what happens when we discuss competitive approaches versus cooperative ones. As Admiral Harrison continued arguing for military control of the technology, the crystal network began to dim and contract. But when other speakers talked about international cooperation, the crystals blazed brighter and expanded their connections. Don't you understand? Elena said urgently. The technology itself is monitoring our intentions. It's deciding whether to continue functioning based on how we choose to use it. Dr. Nakamura's voice joined the discussion from his own laboratory. I'm seeing the same thing here. The energy systems the golden beings taught us are becoming less efficient the more we discuss using them competitively. It's as if they're evaluating our worthiness in real time. The implications sent shockwaves through the assembly. The alien technology wasn't just advanced, it was actively monitoring human behavior and adjusting its performance based on their choices. Admiral Harrison stared at the display in disbelief. Are you saying this technology has some kind of artificial intelligence? Not artificial, Dr. Wright corrected. I think it's connected to the golden beings themselves. They're still watching us, still evaluating our choices. This technology is their way of ensuring that only those who understand cooperation can benefit from their gifts. Sarah seized the moment. Don't you see? This is the test. Not whether we can take their technology and use it for our own purposes, but whether we can understand that true advancement requires us to work together. The technology won't function properly unless we approach it with the right mindset. The debate that followed was unlike anything in human history. Representatives from competing nations found themselves forced to consider genuine cooperation because the alternative was losing access to the most advanced technology ever discovered. Corporate leaders realized that hoarding the knowledge would make it useless, while sharing it would benefit everyone. But the breakthrough came when Captain Chun Dao stood to address the assembly. The man who had nearly died trying to take the golden beings' gifts by force had become their most effective advocate. I want to tell you what it feels like to have your ship falling out of control toward an alien planet because you approached advanced beings with weapons instead of humility, he said quietly. And I want to tell you what it feels like to be rescued by people who could have let you crash because of your own stupidity. Chun Dao described how the Prometheus crew had risked their own safety to save his expedition, demonstrating the cooperation the golden beings valued. They didn't help us because we deserved it. They helped us because that's what cooperation means, working for everyone's benefit, even when others make mistakes. The turning point came when Dr. Singh announced the results of global polling conducted while the conference was in session. The vast majority of Earth's population supported international cooperation in dealing with the golden beings' gifts. Scientists, teachers, artists, and ordinary citizens from every nation were already collaborating on projects inspired by the alien technology. The people have already made their choice, Dr. Singh declared. They want cooperation. They want to prove worthy of these gifts. The question is whether their leaders will follow or obstruct them. One by one, the representatives began changing their positions. Military leaders acknowledged that competitive approaches had failed. Corporate executives proposed shared development models. Political leaders discussed unprecedented levels of international cooperation. But the real validation came from the technology itself. As the assembly moved toward consensus on cooperative approaches, the crystal networks in the laboratories began expanding rapidly. Energy systems that had been operating at minimal efficiency suddenly blazed with power. Communication devices began connecting not just across Luna Station, but across the solar system. Sarah watched in amazement as reports came in from throughout human space. The golden beings' gifts were activating wherever humans embrace cooperation. Mars colonies reported new energy sources coming online. Jupiter research stations detected communication signals from previously unknown sources. Even Earth's most isolated communities found themselves connected to a growing network of cooperative technology. "It's happening," Dr. Wright whispered in awe. "We're passing the test." But Sarah knew the real test was just beginning. Choosing cooperation in a moment of crisis was one thing. Maintaining it over years and decades would be much harder. The Golden Beings had given humanity the tools, but using them wisely would require constant vigilance against the competitive instincts that had nearly destroyed them. As the Global Response Conference concluded with humanity's first truly unified decision in its history, Sarah received a final communication from the Golden Planet. Not words this time, but a feeling of ancient satisfaction mixed with cautious hope. The Golden Beings were pleased with humanity's progress, but they were also wise enough to know that the real work was just beginning. They had watched too many civilizations succeed, initially only to fall back into old patterns of competition and conflict. Over the following months, as humanity began implementing the cooperative technologies, the changes were remarkable. International conflicts decreased as nations found themselves literally unable to use the new systems for aggressive purposes. Economic inequality diminished as the technology proved most efficient when shared rather than hoarded. Environmental problems that had seemed intractable began yielding to solutions that required global cooperation. But perhaps the most significant change was in humanity's perspective on their place in the universe. They were no longer alone, struggling against hostile cosmos. They were students in a vast school, being taught by ancient teachers who had waited patiently for them to be ready for the next lesson. Sarah Chun, now serving as humanity's first ambassador to advanced civilizations, stood once again in the chamber of golden thrones. But this time, she wasn't there as an explorer or petitioner. She was there as a representative of a species that had proven itself worthy of the next phase of its development. "We're ready to learn more," she said simply to the vast presence that surrounded her. "We know," came the reply, filled with warmth and pride. "And when your species has fully integrated these lessons, when cooperation becomes as natural as breathing, we will introduce you to the other civilizations that have passed this test. You will become teachers yourselves, helping younger species find their way to wisdom." As Sarah looked at the thousands of golden thrones representing successful civilizations throughout the galaxy, she realized that humanity's greatest adventure was just beginning. They had proven themselves worthy not just of advanced technology, but of joining the community of wise species that work together to guide the development of consciousness throughout the universe. The test was complete, but the true journey toward transcendence had only just begun. And for the first time in their history, humanity would take that journey not as competitors fighting for individual survival, but as cooperators working toward collective wisdom. In the flowing golden waves of energy that connected every advanced civilization in the galaxy, Earth had finally found its place among the stars.